everyone, thanks for tuning in to SAT Night Live. My name is Jennifer McDevitt and I am a teacher, tutor, instructor for the Princeton Review for a very long time. I'm also the director of tutoring for New York and Connecticut. Tonight we're going to be talking about transitions. For the writing and language section, we have those little words or groups of words that connect or link sentences and ideas together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at our first transition question. So number 9, when it comes to transition, or number 8, sorry. When it comes to transitions, we want to make sure that we read the full context, because if we read a sentence alone, any of these transitions might sound okay, but we need to look and see how do the sentences connect together. So for number 8, the first sentence says, dark chocolate contains less sugar and fewer calories than milk chocolate. And we can just kind of pretend that we don't really have a word here, because this is what's changing in our answer choices, the word also. So pretend that that's not there. Because it contains more antioxidants, it may help prevent heart disease. So we want to ask ourselves, how are these two sentences related? Well, the first one is talking about some of the benefits of dark chocolate. So we have the advantages or benefits. And the second sentence is saying that this chocolate has more antioxidants and it might help prevent heart disease. So that's also positive. So these two ideas are connecting. They're building upon one another. They're going in the same direction. So we want to look for the word in our answer choices that shows that they have something in common and that they're going in the same direction. So looking at our answer choices, and remember A says also. We have also. Well, if you're saying also because it contains more antioxidants, it may help prevent heart disease. Also is building onto things, so let's keep that. Now let's take a look at choice B, however. Well, however is going to show us a contrast, right? That's contrasting, and that's not what we said. We said that the two sentences are agreeing with each other or building onto each other. So we can look at choice C, although. Well, although is going to go in the opposite direction as well. It's not building onto things. And the last one here, for example. For example, because it contains more antioxidants. That's not going to work out. That doesn't grammatically function, and for example it's stating a clarification or an example of something, not building upon ideas. So it's not going to be choice D, and choice A is going to be the only one that works here. So let's try another one. Number 24. Again, we have transitions. So we see in our answer choices what's changing, our transition words, and they're all followed by a comma. So we'll begin with the beginning of this paragraph because we want to have the full context. In some sentences, it's okay to read just the previous sentence and the sentence with the underlined portion. In other ones, you might need a little bit more context. So this paragraph starts, is world peace an unattainable ideal? Since thousands of languages are spoken aloud across the globe, communication among different populations is often strained. While English, again, we'll pretend that while's not there, English is growing as an international language. Non-native speakers who feel that they are at a linguistic or cultural disadvantage often resent its status as a lingua franca. There's a lot going on here, and we want to break it down to make sure that we don't quickly read and pick something that seems like it's okay but doesn't actually correctly link the ideas together. So we see here thousands of languages spoken across the globe, and as a result, communication among different populations is often strained. That's that first part. Population is strained because there's so many different languages spoken. Then the non-underlined portion, after 24, that little number there says, English is growing as an international language. So there's a couple things going on here. This is actually followed by a comma, and that comma is not underlined, which means that it must be correct. So if we look at the next part, non-native speakers who feel that they're at a linguistic or cultural disadvantage often resent its status as a lingua franca. Okay, well, in this case, we have a comma in the middle of the sentence, and that first part it's got a word that's changing. The second part doesn't have anything changing. So the second part is correct as written, and we see that the second part is actually a complete idea or a complete sentence. Complete sentence. So there's a little bit of grammar being tested here. When we have a comma separating something in a complete sentence, we can't have a complete sentence in the beginning part. So that means that whatever word we're going to use, whichever transition word it is, it needs to make that first part incomplete. Okay, So let's put that into action. There's a lot of information. So if we look at choice A, it says, while English is growing as an international language. Not complete, right? Because it's while it's growing. If I just came up to you and I said that, you would ask me, well, while it's growing as an international language, what? Right? Something's missing, so that's incomplete. And we want that. We want an incomplete portion at the beginning. Let's check the other ones. And we're not even thinking about what the words themselves mean at this point. So choice B says, nonetheless, English is growing as an international language. Well, that can stand alone on its own, regardless of what the word means in the context. That would make it a complete sentence, and then that second part after this comma here would also be complete, so that's not going to work, because that would be a comma splice if we just have two complete sentences separated only by a comma. So let's go on to choice C. However, again, that's that contrast word that we saw in the previous question. However, English is growing as an international language. That's complete, so that's not going to work. And then finally, choice D. In addition, English is growing as an international language. Another complete sentence situation, so D can't work, and the only one that works is going to be choice A. So thinking about the words and mean aside, grammatically, A is the only one that works here. So sometimes when it comes to transition words, yes, it's helpful to know what the words mean, and you should study them. If you come across transition words when you're doing your practice and you say, notwithstanding, I've never seen that word before. Jot it down, look it up, because you're likely to see the same kind of transition words tested over and over. So you do want to keep track of that, but you also want to notice that once in a while you'll have something like that comma in the non-underlined portion, and they might be testing you on grammar as well as the transition word. Okay, so let's try another question here. Number 3, we got a big chunk of text, and when we look and see, well, where's number 3? It's over here. We want to back up just enough to make sure that we have the full context to figure out which of these answer choices, which of our transition words is going to best link the ideas. So let's bump it up to around here, where it says, the central challenge of maintaining an ecosystem, especially by artificial means, is that ecosystems have a tendency to change, particularly with the dual influence of human reacting and a rapidly altering climate. You can just disregard this reacting here. That's obviously another question, so it sounds a little bit funny. Disregard that grammatical part there. So then our next part, again, disregard the word that's underlined. One career that has grown by leaps and bounds in the last 50 years is that the soil conservationists whose land use surveys guide both public and private entities as to how to work within sustainable ecosystems. So we want to see, how do these two sentences link together? Are they agreeing with each other? Are they contrasting each other? What's happening here? So in this first sentence that I read here, we see the central challenge of maintaining an ecosystem is that they have this tendency to change, and it's talking about this rapidly altering climate. And our next sentence, where we have the underlying portion, it's talking about this career that's grown by leaps and bounds, and that's the soil conservationist. So we might want to back up and just read one more sentence before, just to get a little bit more context here in this paragraph. So the very first sentence said, as people become more sensitive to the idea of preserving certain ecosystems, yet more attention must be paid to the land. So this first sentence in this paragraph is talking about people being more sensitive about preserving certain ecosystems. So that's going to give us a little bit more context to fully understand what comes before the underlying portion in number 3. So this whole first part is about the importance of preserving things. And now the second part, where our underlying portion is and as a result, the soil conservationist is a career that seems to be very important. So they're kind of building upon one another. Because because people are becoming more sensitive to this idea of preserving the environment, it makes sense then that one career that's going to grow is someone who is involved in conservation efforts, in this case with soil. So we want to find our transition word that is agreeing or showing that it's going in that same direction. So if we look at choice A, still one career that's grown by leaps and bounds. Still's not what we're looking for there. Still's not showing the same direction. It's usually going to be something of contrast. Like I might say, it's pouring outside. still, I'm going to go run 5 miles. So it's showing that despite something, I'm still going to do something. That's not the situation in this question. So A is going to be out. Nonetheless is very similar to still. I can use the same example I just used. It's raining outside. Nonetheless, I'm going to go run 5 miles. So those are both showing a sort of contrast, a despite. Now choice C says finally. Well, finally is after you've had several things happening. You're looking at a sequence of events. I did this, then I did that, and finally, I did this other thing. We don't have a sequence of events here, so C is not going to work because we're not looking at chronology or time. Hopefully it's choice D. Let's look at this. Therefore. So therefore is what I was talking about earlier. It's as a result. Because people are more sensitive to this idea about preservation of these ecosystems, they're going to be more inclined to be in this career of soil conservationist. So therefore, it's building upon your ideas. All right, so we can go take a look at another of these transition examples here. So number 12, again, we see 4 answer choices with transition word or words. Sometimes we see more than one word in our transition answer choice, usually followed by a comma. So we'll go ahead and read the full paragraph here, and we see Nobel Prizes have been given since 1901 as a way to honor outstanding achievements in physics, chemistry, literature, medicine, and economics. There may be some controversy as to who earns these awards in many cases. Again, pretend we don't see this word. There can be no doubt that the winners are always accomplished in their fields and have contributed something significant to their disciplines and the world at large. So in this case, we have a semicolon, so this transition word is part of the same sentence as the previous chunk of text. So we want to see, how do these 2 bits of text relate? So the first part says, there may be some controversy. There's some controversy. That means that not everybody agrees. There's some people saying one thing, some people saying something else, and that's in regard to who earns these awards. So that's a keyword, controversy. And you always want to underline the important keywords in the bits of the sentence to make sure that you're not missing any little details. So the next part, there can be no doubt that the winners are always accomplished. There's no doubt. That's important. That means that we're certain that whoever wins one of these prizes is accomplished in his or her field. Okay, so if we're looking at controversy versus no doubt, we see a contrast, right? In one situation, people are not agreeing, but in regard to who wins, regardless of who won, he or she is definitely accomplished in the field. So we're going to look for a transition word that denotes some sort of a contrast. So choice A, we have therefore. And we saw earlier, therefore, we use that when we're building upon ideas. So it's not going to work here because we're looking for a contrast. So we can get rid of A. For example is literally what it sounds like, and we've seen this one again earlier. For example, I like all kinds of ice cream. For example, I don't care if it's chocolate or strawberry, right? You're clarifying, you're giving a specific example of something. And in this situation, we're not giving a specific example, so that's kind of a weird one. That wouldn't work here. We can get rid of that. And choice C, however, you'll see however a lot. You've noticed in this selection of answers and questions, we've seen however a few times. So however is always going to denote a contrast, so let's look at however within the sentence to make sure that seems okay. So there may be some controversy as to who earns these awards in many cases. However, there can be no doubt that the winners are always accomplished in their field and have contributed something significant to their disciplines and the world at large. That checks out. Sounds good in the sentence in terms of does it agree grammatically and everything, and it's a contrast. So let's keep that and then take a look at choice D, because you always want to review all of your answer choices. Fightingly there can be no doubt. That's not going to work. Fightingly is not linking those ideas together, and it sounds kind of funny in the sentence. So the only one that works here, and the only one that actually shows us that contrast that we're looking for, is the word however. So number 12 is going to be choice C. All right, so let's try another one. Number 23. We'll start with the text from the beginning. So, the most obvious facet of global warming is the rise in global temperatures. What many do not understand quite as well, however, or pretending that that word's not there, are the factors that contribute to the rise in global temperatures. And then it goes on to say, the rise in carbon dioxide levels, for instance, is commonly cited as a reason, but what exactly does this chemical compound do? So we don't really need to look at that last sentence here for this particular question. We want to focus on the first two. So the very first sentence says that the most obvious facet of global warming is this rise in global temperatures. So it's very obvious people are noticing the temperatures rising. So we want to look and say, well, how does that relate to the next sentence? And this says, what many do not understand quite as well, are the factors that contribute to the rise in global temperature. So a lot of people are aware that this rise in temperature is occurring, but there's a contrast, but they don't really understand the why or the how behind it. So we're looking for a contrast. Let me get a little bit ahead of myself there. Let me spell that word correctly. Contrast. We're looking for another contrast one here. So we'll go through the answer choices and see which answers have a contrast word. So choice A, we have however, which we saw in the last one worked. So we'll hang on to that one because we know that it's a contrast. If we look at choice B, thereby. Well, thereby is going to be going in the same direction. If you're thereby doing something, you're kind of agreeing or building onto it. So that's not going to show a contrast, and it can be choice B. And correspondingly, I will do this. That's also agreeing with something. It would agree with the previous sentence, and we're not looking for agreement again. So we can get rid of that. And guess what? Choice D, thus, also is agreeing with or going in that same direction. So B, C, and D, none of them are showing us a contrast, and the only one that gives us a contrast is choice A. And we can just read the full sentence with it to make sure everything's okay, but it says, what many do not understand quite as well, however, are the factors that contribute to the rise in global temperatures. So that checks out. And so if you notice, by using process of elimination, you can get rid of answer choices that just don't do what they need to do. If we need to have a word that's contrasting or agreeing with, we're not going to select something that doesn't do what it needs to do. So let's try another one. Number 11. This is a really big paragraph here. Don't worry too much. So what I want to point out is, if you look here at 11, this is the very end of that paragraph. So when we're looking at a sentence at the end, a lot of times it's going to do something, perhaps summarizing some of the main ideas that were discussed in that paragraph. So we want to read the full paragraph to make sure we have all of that context. So we'll start from the beginning. And it says, however, paternity leave is not just about what potential employees want. There's a second reason that paternity leave policies are so important. They bring attention to a larger societal issue. Not enough emphasis has been placed on the importance of both parents being involved in the earliest stages of a child's life. Paternity leave allows fathers to bond with their children earlier, participate in the household more actively, and raise children with a greater sense of gender equality. Blank, paternity leave not only benefits a lone employee and his or her family, it improves society as a whole. So we want to look and see, how do these connect? So it not only benefits a lone employee, it improves society as a whole. So you want to say, does this agree with or disagree with what came before it? So we can go back to the previous sentence. It tells us that paternity leave allows fathers to bond with their children, participate in these households more actively, and raise their children with a greater sense of gender equality. So these are all positive things, right? We just saw all these positive attributes of this idea of paternity leave, all the advantages. So these two, the paragraph itself and the final sentence, are all going to be about the positive effects or consequences of paternity leave. So we want to look at a word that is building upon ideas or agreeing with what we saw before. All right, agreeing with and even potentially clarifying even further. So if we look at choice A, in other words, so a lot of times when we see in other words, that's a clarifying thing. if you're further explaining something or giving more detail about it. That performs the function that I was just discussing, right? It's adding on to that and clarifying. Otherwise, that's not going in the same direction here. So otherwise, you can do this, otherwise you can do that. So it's more of like an or sort of situation, not an and. We're looking for an and. We're building upon ideas. So it's not going to be B. Completely, paternity leave not only benefits a lone employee and his or her family, it improves society as a whole. So like completely, that's just funky. That's going to be out. And then alternatively, so if you have an alternative, it's another option, something that's different. But we don't want an alternative. We're going with paternity leave, and we're seeing why and how it has these positive effects. So it's not going to be alternatively, because we're not looking for an alternative. We're looking for that in other words and that clarification and building upon of ideas. So number 8 is going to be choice A. All right, so those are just a few of our transition examples. You will definitely see transitions on the SAT. They tend to be very difficult because we have to force ourselves to stop and take our time, read the sentence or even sentences before the underlined portion, as well as the full sentence with and up until the end of that sentence with the underlined portion, so that we have the full context. And you always want to ask yourself, are they going in the same direction, in the opposite direction? Are the ideas contrasting? Are they being built upon? What's going on and what's the relationship? Those are the main things that you want to ask yourself when you're looking at transitions, and make sure that you go through each answer choice carefully and pay attention to those details. Keep that pencil moving and underline keywords so that you see the relationships. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I will see you all next time.